All right, Ruth 2 today. So, in our last session, we met a family that experienced great loss. They lost the father and they lost the two boys, and so we had 3 widows left. But remember, only 2 widows walked back into Bethlehem. Okay, so when Naomi returned from Moab to Bethlehem, she was bitter, broken. Remember, she even wanted to change her identity. She wanted to change her name. And she thinks that she comes empty-handed, but what she actually has is everything with her that she needs. She has her God that she is going back to and returning to, and she has her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Okay? So Ruth has pledged herself to Naomi and to Naomi's people and to Naomi's God, and she is going to go back with her. So in chapter 2, we're going to see how God is going to respond to that return and to that faithfulness. All right? So let's dive right in to Ruth chapter 2, verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Okay, so in this verse, we are introduced to a man named Boaz, okay? And he is basically a man from the clan of the family. So the clan or the tribe, think of it, would be made up of a bunch of different families. So they were related to Elimelech. We don't know exactly how, possibly like cousins, distant relatives and stuff. But Boaz's name means quickness, okay? So quickness. And he's described in the Hebrew as a prominent man of noble character, okay? Basically, they would call him a man of strength, integrity, and status, okay? So he was wealthy. But remember, we just went through this famine, and we don't know how long the famine lasts. Elimelech and their family were gone for 10 years. We have no idea how long that famine lasted, but Boaz stayed. And God blessed him for it. He not only protected his family, Boaz and his family, but made them wealthy even during the famine. Okay? So while Elimelech fled to Moab, Boaz stayed. Okay? And we're going to see how God blessed him for that. So verse 2, and Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened, put that in air quotes, she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. Okay, so we see something interesting here. It's Ruth who takes the initiative. Remember, she's the foreigner. She doesn't know about this God and about his laws and about his land and how things operate here. So I wonder who she heard from to understand the laws of this land. Probably her mother-in-law. Okay, so it's probably that Naomi taught Ruth God's word, because in Leviticus 19, God of Israel had given instructions to poor people that if they wanted to find food, they could go out into the fields while they were being harvested and they could pick up the grain that had fallen on the floor, okay, on the ground. So these were kind of the leftovers, but it provided them work, it provided them food, and it provided them dignity. So this wasn't charity or handout. They actually had to go out there and work the fields, doing the same things, but basically they went behind and picked up all the leftovers, okay? So this was God's compassionate provision, and Moabites do not have this law at all. They have no provision for poor people in their land. So the only way Ruth would have known about this law is if her mother-in-law taught her about this law, okay? So it still requires effort, and it requires faithfulness on the part of the people who own the land, because they have to tell their workers, don't pick up after yourselves. Leave it. If you drop something, leave it, okay? Because this was the law at the time, all right? So Naomi tells her, go ahead, I'm going to grant your request, and Ruth gets to work, okay? So this would require very, very hard work and long, long days, because you are actually going out there and picking heads of grain off of the ground. And I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's hard work, okay? Out in the sand and out in the grass and all of that stuff. But it would produce the grain that you would need to survive, okay? So we don't know exactly how large these kind of family fields were, but basically it was one large piece of property, and different families would plant and harvest different sections of it. And so we're told here in the verses that Ruth happened, yes, read that in quotes, happened to come to part of the field that belongs to a man named Boaz, okay? But if you remember our study of Esther, we don't believe in coincidences, right? Absolutely not. God has ordained her to go to exactly where she needs to go, okay? And he was guiding her steps even though she doesn't know it at the time. We're given hints that God does. So think about the last time that you took a random step of faith or action and how God was guiding that. And you will set yourself right in the sandals of Ruth. Okay? So verse 4. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to his reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. See, she said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers.' So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest." Okay? So while Ruth is out there gleaning in the field, this man arrives, Boaz, okay? And he greets his workers. And in fact, he blesses his workers. He goes out there from his, home in Bethlehem. He goes out to see his workers. And they respond with a blessing to their boss. So I don't know if your boss has ever come in one day and greeted you, and you have gone, "Oh, bless you, boss."
Yeah.
Okay. So we're starting to get little hints about Boaz's character. That if he showed up there, they weren't towering in fear and like, "Oh my gosh, the boss is here. Get to work. We're slacking off. He fell asleep, get him up," right? They bless him. They're excited that he has shown up, that their boss has shown up. Okay? So this tells us a lot about Boaz, right? He leads with kindness and respect, and they answer in turn with blessings to him. And it's interesting that Boaz notices that there's a stranger among them, which means he knows his people. He knows who's supposed to be there. So he knows every face in that field, and he sees one out of place here. Who's that woman? Okay? And the man in charge tells Boaz, she's the Moabite who came with Naomi. Okay? And Ruth asked permission to glean in the field. She didn't have to. It was her legal right to do so as a poor person living in that land. She didn't have to ask, but she goes out of her way to ask permission to glean in the field. Okay? And this man also adds that she's been there since basically sunup. She's been there since they started for the day, and she's only taken one short break. So she has been out there working hard. And Boaz hears all of this, and his interest is piqued. This one's different. Okay? So verse 8. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter. Do not go glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Okay? So we see another layer to the depth of Boaz and his character. Okay? He simply could have just said, "All right," and gone about his day, and left this poor foreigner to pick in his fields, as Levitical law would have allowed. Okay? But he actually stops and has a conversation with her. Goes and seeks Ruth out and talks to her. He offers her safety, companionship, and refreshment. Okay? So these female workers of Boaz basically would have come behind the men, and they would have tied up the bundles. Okay? So the men are out there, they're doing the hard work, they're cutting down the bundles of wheat and barley and things like that. And then the women would come behind and they would tie up little bundles. Okay? So Boaz is saying, stay close to them. They're going to be protected. Stay near to the protection. Okay? And she would have also been able to talk to them and hang out with the women. Okay? So Boaz invites her to stay close, promises protection, even goes so much as to say, "I've told my young men, don't touch her." Okay? She's under my protection. Don't touch her. And ensures that she has water. So anytime she needs to go get a glass of water, she can ask the men for their water. That's completely unheard of, okay? This is over-the-top kindness that Boaz is extending to this foreigner woman. He is definitely being the church out there, okay? If you ever needed a poster board, this is Boaz, okay? Boaz is being the church out there. All right, verse 10. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." And then she said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I'm not one of your servants." Okay? So Ruth at this point is just overwhelmed by Boaz's kindness. He has gone completely out of his way, over the top kindness for her. And she wants to know exactly what we would want to know. Why are you doing this for me? I'm a foreigner. I'm not even one of your workers. Why are you doing this for me? Okay? She doesn't believe herself worthy of his kindness, and she wants to know why. What is his motive behind all of this? Her ethnicity alone would have disqualified her from a lot of Boaz's kindness. She was an outsider in every way. Okay? Ethnicity, religiously, legally, everything. He had no business being kind to her, and yet he goes out of his way to show her kindness. So Boaz tells her exactly why. He's heard everything. Remember, Bethlehem is a little tiny town. We only got a couple hundred people who live in Bethany, okay? But remember, he's also related to Elimelech. So when Elimelech died in Moab, news of his death would have eventually traveled back to his hometown in Bethlehem, along with the death of the two sons, okay? And evidently, news of Ruth coming back with Naomi also made the headlines. Okay, but remember, tiny little town, everybody gossips, okay? Everybody has told him all about Ruth, okay? And her commitment to the God of Israel, that she's willing to turn her back on her people and her home and everything to follow after Naomi and Naomi's God, the God of Israel. So then Boaz blesses her, and he says, "May God repay you for what you have done, the God under whose wings you have taken refuge." Now, it's beautiful language, absolute beautiful language. It shows up again in Psalm 17, 36, and 63. And for those of you who know the rest of the story, those were Psalms written by David, okay? And at this particular wording that Boaz uses will come back around in the rest of the story. All right, verse 14. And at mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine." And she sat beside the reapers, and he passed her roasted grain. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some of the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." So if we thought we found the depths of Boaz's kindness, we've just scratched the surface, okay? He goes out of his way again to invite this foreigner to lunch, something you did not do as an Israelite. Gentiles were not allowed to sit at the table with you. That would have been considered an unclean act to do. But he goes to even further inclusion and lets her dip in his wine. Y'all, that would have been so faux pas. You're allowing this Gentile woman to dip into the same oils and wine and stuff that you let everyone else dip inside. It would have been a scandal, okay? The news in the next headline of the Bethlehem paper would have just read, "Boaz is out of his mind," okay? And he allows her to do this. And he's the one who's passing tossing her food. Please make sure you get everything that you want. Eat until you're satisfied. He's like, just like, have you ever had that person in your life? You're just too skinny. Just like dumping more food on your plate. He's just dumping food on top of her. Eat whatever you like. Okay? Come be a part of the meal. So she's not just sitting on the fringes. She's not just getting crumbs. He's inviting her to be included in the feast, in this food, okay? As a Gentile, but as a Gentile woman, okay? She's sitting with the men. Did you catch that? She's not sitting with the women at another table. She's sitting with the men, okay? So Ruth gets to eat her fill, and she's got leftovers. She's got a doggy bag that she gets to take home, okay? So when she returns to work, Boaz instructed his workers. Okay. Again, we have not found the depths of Boaz's kindness here. He says, see all the bundles that you've already collected? I want you to take some and accidentally drop some for her. So she has less work to do. So she can just pick them up. Okay? So this goes way beyond the Levitical commandment. The Levitical commandment just says, whatever you drop, they get to pick up. Just don't go back behind yourself and pick up. And he is instructing them to intentionally drop more and drop stuff that's already been cut, so it'd be really easy to pick it up.
This is like the best definition of if you wanted to, you would.
If you wanted to, you would. Yes. So she wouldn't be like, rooting around in the grass and the sand and like trying to pick heads up. All she'd have to do is literally like pick up bundles, handfuls. Okay, so he's trying to make her work a little bit easier here, but still the dignity. She has to go do the work. She has to put the work in. Okay? So he also tells them, don't harass her. Don't say anything. Don't make her feel bad. Don't shame her for what I'm telling you to do. Okay? And these workers listen to him. They respect him enough to go, you're out of your mind, but okay, I'll do this for you. All right? So this ensured even more protection from her because she wouldn't have to be on the outskirts of the field. She would get to be at the very center, the heart of all the action. So there would be all these people around her helping to protect her, okay? But Boaz isn't done yet, okay? We see him drop all of these different things, all right? This beautiful image of grace, and Boaz is not done yet. We're going to see even more depths of Boaz's kindness to her, okay? Ruth is experiencing grace like we would never imagine, like unbelievably beyond more than she could ever ask or dream. She feels completely undeserved of the dignity and respect that she is getting, but Boaz is giving it to her anyway. Verse 17, so she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. All right, so Ruth gathers until evening, but her work is not done. Okay, at 5 o'clock when the whistle blows, she's not done. Okay, because after you gather, you have to then beat the grain out to get the actual grain from the pods and things like that. So she has to do all of that herself. Again, dignity and work here. You have to do it yourself in order to take home the grains that you would then use for bread and different things like that. So an ephah is about roughly 5.5 gallons. Okay, so 5.5 gallons of barley is what she gets to take home. And she takes it home to show her mother-in-law, and she also, remember, has her goodie bag full of food from Boaz's table. And she says, here you go, here's dinner. I've provided dinner for you as well, my mother-in-law. My question is, what has Naomi been doing all day long?
That's what I was thinking.
Right? Her poor daughter-in-law's out there working all day long, and she's come home with, bacon and frying it up in the pan too, okay? But Naomi sees everything that's going on, and we see a window into Ruth's character. She's a hard worker. She has a very good work ethic. To be out there all day long, even in the midst of all this grace, put in the effort, get her own stuff done, and take it home. And her thoughtfulness. She brought her leftovers home to her mother-in-law. Okay? She could have just kept them for herself. And she doesn't. She provides for her mother-in-law too. Okay? So verse 19. And her mother-in-law said to her, where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed of the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "This man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." And Ruth the Moabite said, "Besides, he said to me, 'You shall keep close to my young men until they have finished all of my harvest.'" And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted." So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. So Naomi sees all this grain, okay, and she hears the name, Boaz. She knows who Boaz is, okay? And everything starts changing for Naomi. We start seeing her bitterness start to melt. Wait, whose field did you say you were in? What did he do for you? Remember those crumbs that she was hoping for when she went back to Bethlehem? She's starting to see that the Lord is going to provide for her, okay? God has not forsaken Naomi. He's going to take care of her too. So Ruth tells Naomi all about Boaz and his extreme kindness, and Naomi agrees. This is really good for us, okay? This is going to ensure our survival, okay? So Naomi reveals to Ruth that Boaz is a relative, and not just any relative. He is in a position that he could potentially redeem them. And that's something we're going to talk about a little later because this becomes extremely important to the rest of the story. But Naomi encourages Ruth, stay under Boaz's protection. Whatever Boaz tells you to do, do it. Okay? Because he has shown his character, his kindness, and his grace. So stay under Boaz's protection and continue in the fields. And so Ruth goes back to work every day of the harvest, and we're told both for the barley and the wheat harvest. That's about 2 months of work every day, going out to the field and picking up what's left over, and then shucking it at the end of the day, and then bringing it home for Naomi. So Ruth goes on to work about 2 months, providing for her and her mother-in-law. So in Ruth 2, we see God's providence once again meeting with human obedience and human choice. Ruth didn't just sit at home with her mother-in-law hoping for a miracle, hoping somebody would take pity on them, and hoping that just God would provide and just make bread appear on their table, right? She is the one who steps out in faith, and that God guided her path. And Boaz's generosity reminds us of the very heart of God, welcoming, protecting, full of grace. And Naomi's bitterness begins to melt as she's seeing God working here in this situation. So wherever you are today, feeling unnoticed or wondering if God even sees you or cares about the situation that you are in right now, you can trust that he is still at work, even if you can't see it, because his hand is often going to show up in those ordinary moments. Okay? Our job is to take whatever that next step is going to be.